The best security insurance of a state is in the psychological construct of its people, the psychological architecture of its citizens. Human beings naturally fear a chaotic state of nature, where life is solitary, brutish, chaotic, nasty, poor, and short. To escape this fear, the citizens in a state contract their loyalty to sovereign power in exchange for peace and protection. The insurance is the citizens' internal conviction that the alternative to the state is worse.
Now, when we talk about security of the state, I think it has to be viewed in three forms. It's three-dimensional, it's multidisciplinary, and intertemporal.
But why do governments manage to stay in power for long while the majority of the population is being exploited? Two ways. Number one, force. Police, courts, prison. Number two, consent. School, religion, media, and culture. And if a state achieves hegemony, it has successfully injected its values in the psychology of its citizens. So state powers appears to be natural or common sense. But the two ways, force and consent, cannot be applied simultaneously. Any government, is the most informed institution of that state. It controls unparalleled apparatus for gathering information. That's intelligence agencies, tax registry, police network, information pipelines. It's one highly informed panoptic giant. And this power elite controls the national flow of information.
We had the ICT minister, cabinet secretary, now even suggesting we need to control, to monitor the use of internet. And the biggest beneficiary of this bill would be the state.
Like Michael Fackel said in Discipline and Punish, in a panopticon prison, the central tower stands surrounded by a circle of small cells where the guards in the tower can see inside the cells at all times, but the prisoner cannot see inside the tower at any time.
The owners of the gangs sit in this house, Mr. Speaker. They are in Senate, they are in National Assembly, some of them are in high political party offices.
Information is power, but the power to deny or withhold that information is the ultimate sovereignty. Because a state uses its monopoly on information not to uncover the truth, but to police the boundaries of how much the public is allowed to know. And systemic deception is an essential tool in maintaining power.
There's an inseparable relationship between power and violence. The Norwegian sociologist Johan Galtung says that violence is the force that limits people's options.
When the psychological anchor slips, the state turns inwards and weaponizes fear, since the government has a monopoly on legitimate use of physical force.
The entire point of a government is to distribute, manage, legitimize, and maintain a monopoly on violence.
When a regime faces a crisis of legitimacy, due to economic failures, corruption, or rising political opposition, the psychological anchors of security changes. Instead of maintaining security through consent, the state manufactures it through coercion. A government can easily manage a population that simply wants cheaper fuel or better roads because it can simply buy them off or by applying standard economic adjustments. But a regime cannot easily buy off or terrify a population that is driven by an ideology of higher moral purpose. And at that time, the state loses its psychological leverage.
Kenyans are from tribes, but Kenyans are not tribal.
And since the war between a state maintaining its image and the citizens' ideology is constant, once the psychological bank runs bankrupt, the state resorts to use of physical reserves.
Don't listen so much to the words they tell you, especially the ones in government. Look at their actions. Because how would a confident government do that? Because a government that's confident has no problem with its population, with its people.
The reason why a government uses proxies like goons is simply because, in my opinion, goons are more terrifying than the police.
At the same time, the Interior CS raised alarm over the emergence of new criminal gangs that are increasingly disrupting peace in both urban and rural areas.
And this triggers an acute psychological regression because unstructured violence is more terrifying than structured police force.
The core of our military's relationship to the nation and how accountability is structured. I think you are privatizing something that is what essentially sets a nation state apart, which is the monopoly on on violence.
When police beat protesters, it's called state oppression. But when an anonymous armed thug in civilian clothes attack protesters, while the police stand by and watch, it creates an acute cognitive orientation.
When you see policemen, okay, National Police Service escorting goons, now we are finished.
And at that time, people can no longer identify the boundary of safety.
Police officers served side by side with goons, armed with djembe sticks and other crude weapons.
And the end goal is to alter a person's internal risk assessment precisely in future. And this drives people back to the psychological arms of the state, desperately pleading for the government to restore order and therefore paralyzing the public's capacity to revolt. Clearly, it's an inversion of reality. It isolates peaceful protesters, probably those watching from home, not to see the protesters as courageous, but as vectors of violence. And the government absolves itself of blame.
To the young people of Kenya, who I must thank for helping our country organize our democratic discourse around issues, I thank you and assure you that the conversation you have begun around pertinent issues of our nation continue to inform our policy and governance decisions.
The lead of dictatorship is held down by the dreads of responsibility, because an effective regime must destroy the horizontal ties between its citizens, ensuring they do not trust each other enough to organize. Because a state knows it cannot defeat the psychology of a collective effervescence, a sense of shared identity, or the strength of unity in numbers while the people are still united. So when the sun sets, the state resorts to hunting down individuals, the asymmetry of visibility. And deterrence works best when the target believes that the state has both the capacity and the willingness to destroy them.
And now it's the use of the Potter Act to ensure that these persons who engage in protest are frustrated into the criminal justice system.
When a state reframes an activist as an existential threat to national security, it achieves two things. Number one, delegitimization. It strips off the activist's political identity, disassociates them with society through a fear of guilt of association. And two, legal despotism. By invoking anti-terror laws, the state can easily bypass normal jurisdiction protections, allowing detention without trial or denial of bail, even a secret hearing.
There is no point for the Law Society of Kenya to spend a lot of energy to try to reduce the bail terms for suspected criminals.
And clearly, a modern state is a division of labor, where some people do the dirty job while others keep their hands clean. And the hypocrisy becomes a political necessity because it allows a government to act brutally while still maintaining the moral consensus required to govern. They still stand as nationalists, and they not only have the power to disapprove the atrocities of the side, but also the capacity not to hear them.
Wale walituchukulia mashamba Kwale, wale walitukulia mashamba huku katika maeneo ya pwani yote, na waambia mkuwe tayari kuregesha nazi, wenye nazi sasa wako tayari kuja kuzinyakua.
Acting ignorant is never a lack of capacity, but a state's exercise of power. It's manufactured ignorance.
The Interior CS denying claims of establishment of a masked, plain-clothed police killer squad targeting protesters using unregistered police vehicles.
There is no known police squad that is involved in killing people, at least not the cabinet secretary is aware of.
Moreover, a state has a monopoly on meaning, not necessarily interpretation, but meaning. And it seeks a monopoly on the meaning of violence, because in a state's eyes, a physical act of violence remains socially neutral until it's interpreted. And the framing is important. For example, saying died instead of killed.
Now, a day after 15 people were killed during Wednesday's countrywide protest,
2 fateful days of sheer terror, we stay Poleni San.
The state establishes a system where the truth is not determined by objective observation, but by the sovereignty.
Extensive coverage of the day's events. Today's protest took a sinister turn as police officers and hired thugs joined forces in plain sight.
And the people, the loyalists, do not necessarily believe this denial as factual, but as a necessary tactical weapon. They accept the truth of utility over the truth of fact. So to them, victims do not possess the right, the human right, to be called victims in the first place. Ultimately, this dual reality thrives because the human mind desperately wants to avoid dissonance. And willingly, people deploy doublethink. When a government is losing, peace is dangerous.
That we are seeing a state of violence setting a pace in our political rallies and places where we least expect them.
So by letting violence escalate between ethnic groups, social classes, or political factions, the national conversation changes. And once the violence has reached pitch, the losing government executes its psychological pivot and acts shocked with theatrical condemnations.
It was a very, very unfortunate incident. We have condemned that action in our social media.
It's a reflex triggered by the state by allowing violence to seem out of control, creating an artificial state of nature. It's an arsonist acting like a fire person who steps forward to extinguish the very fire he started.